Hello everyone, it's another episode of Paul and Bradley's Psychic Cafe, or is it? Because you can also find this interview available on Chris Luard's Such Sweet Thunder Meditation Podcast. It's a crossover episode, baby. I'm just posting a little introduction here. This is going to be a little bit more stripped back because I'm kind of taking a break from a lot of my creative endeavours, because it turns out if you do them non-stop for 2 years straight without taking a break, you end up a bit stressed and you get a bit ill. So I'm taking a holiday. Not that you've noticed with the release schedule of these. But yeah, I'm just going to let you know this is going to be a little bit more stripped back. No fake ads or any bells and whistles. We're just going to go straight into it. But, well, I'll do a little intro first. Not like you need one, though. Chris Luard, you all know him. He's been on this show countless times, and every time it's been fantastic. He's the author of the Such Sweet Thunder book. He's the host of the Such Sweet Thunder podcast. He's a certified mindfulness instructor and expert on secular Buddhism. And today we'll be discussing the topics of self-compassion, forgiveness, and the inner critic, which will be the topics of discussion for his next retreat, which you will hear more about at the end of the podcast. So without further ado, let's just get on into this. Let's just cut right into it. Just get really get right in. It's time. Hello, Chris. Welcome once more to the show. Is it? If it's my show or your show, I'm not. Whose show are we on now?
It's both of our show.
Yes. Welcome.
It's a
the
duet.
multi-dimensional, omnipresent show that ripples across the space-time continuum. So I just wanted to start by saying thank you so much for taking me on the voyage of your equanimity course. That was what was it called again? Equanimity.
A clear-seeing heart.
A clear-seeing heart. That's the one. Yes, it's. We're just entering the final session in a few days' time, and it's been really enlightening, very sort of uplifting, and it's just been extremely helpful in a lot of aspects of our life. How do you think it went? Are you happy with it?
Yeah, I'm very happy with it. For me as a facilitator, it's always great to see, when I'm offering these teachings that have really made such a deep impact in my own life. When I see that these teachings, when other people take them on and engage with them, they make a deep impact in other people's lives as well. It's so fulfilling for me to see that. And I've seen that not just in the section that you're in, everybody in the section that you're in, I've seen a shift or noticed a really marked change in how they might be experiencing their life. And I've seen that in all of the other sections that I'm offering as well, both retreats in 2 sections each. It's pretty palpable how everybody's really taking the practices to heart, and it's really bringing them some profound and I think insightful ways of seeing and experiencing their life.
Yeah, I've got to say, I mean, I think it's been really inspiring to see these other people just also saying, so I just, I thought I was about to, my co-worker's a psychopath, and I thought, I'm going to really strike out. And then I thought, nah, actually, no, hold on a minute. Let's try that equanimity and holding them in the compassionate sort of sphere. And it's interesting because a lot of the time the conversations a lot of the time, because there's a lot of back and forths and a lot of especially when I'm around, a lot of endless sort of discussions of the topics, and so we don't always get to the meditative practices, but it feels like even just hearing the concepts alone actually has an impact.
Hmm. Yeah. Thank you for that, for sure. And for me, I kind of prioritize how I structure each. We meet for 2 hours, and 2 hours is really not a lot of time and for the ground that I intend to cover in each session. And I really prioritize the concepts that we'll be talking about, because, well, particularly equanimity is such a rich and deep topic, and there are lots and lots of different teachings around equanimity and different ways that we can land into that sphere of equanimity. And I wanted to cover all of that because these practices land differently for different people, and certain practices will resonate with some people and not with others. And so if I went into the course and said, okay, we're just going to do these practices, these maybe 2 sets of practices from this particular tradition, that could be great for some people. But I really want to paint the picture with a really wide brush so that everyone gets to see the color, So I think it's really helpful to use the sessions for conveying the concepts of the practices, and for the question answer discussion back and forth, as you put it, because there is so much value in learning from each other and sharing notes and comparing. What happened there for you, or hearing other people's stories, how they're applying this in their own life. I think that's incredibly valuable. And then almost all of the meditations, if they're not already meditations that serve the material in the course on my podcast, then I'll create a meditation for that particular practice, for that particular session, and then send it out to the participants. So I'm happy to guide meditations. I love guiding meditations because then I get to meditate too. And that's really quite lovely and kind of a treat. But at the same time, I tend to that's kind of third in line. If there's time, if there's not a lot of questions and discussion happening, we definitely then move into a guided meditation. Also, I find that can sometimes inspire a conversation. So sometimes I'll start a session with a guided meditation with the intention that it hopes to stir things up a bit, like that. And I found that to be quite helpful too.
Yeah, it's a real shotgun approach to the old Enlightenment there. Yeah, and I say. I'm sorry. I find that so it's been really beneficial actually, like trying the different sort of meditation techniques. And as I was saying to I think you yesterday, yesterday. I've been noticing sort of marked improvements in my own style of meditation. Mainly just because I've become much more aware of when I'm distracted, and I can like feel what it's like in my body, and I think the thing that really interested me when we've done a meditation, a lot of the times as part of the meditation there's like an offering of may you be happy, may you find peace, offering that to all sorts of different people, like and especially people we find challenging or neutral to. And at the end you ask any resistances, any sort of did anything come up during that? And it's interesting just hearing like the different things that people were talking about, say like some people were saying, I found it really difficult to actually feel much for that person, or I found it really, or some people were like, suddenly it was like voomp, the veil got lifted, and it's you wouldn't think that such massive insight could come from just sitting down and thinking nice thoughts about someone. And yeah, and it's just so Oh, there was something else I was going to say. It's just so simple, you know. All you're doing is sitting there doing nothing, and all of a sudden you're having profound experiences.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Yeah, it's simple, but it's not easy.
Yeah,
I think that's, there's, you know, some meditation instructions actually there's a lot to them. We've done a little bit of those in the 8-week program together. For example, the 7 factors of awakening. We have a lot of moving parts and things like that.
a lot of lists.
Um, yeah, yeah. But yes, in general, one of my teachers would often say, when he was asked what he does when he's meditating, he says he does as little as possible. And the less you do, the more interesting it becomes. And
Mm,
I really find that to be quite accurate, actually. This is speaking more to like resting meditation, where you really, really invite the body, mind, and heart to rest as deeply as possible so that there's absolutely no motion at all. It's just pure stillness. And because then when you're absolutely still, the energy that was used to hold things down is no longer operative. That energy is resting. So then things come through, things start to bubble up and emerge, that often can be very helpful, things that we want to look at and address.
mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember during my first sort of year or so of like really solid, meditative practice where I was like, no, I'm going to do this every day. Within a few months, all sorts of stuff was coming up, within a few months, like massive, great chunks of like, you know, depression and like anger and that sort of stuff was just falling off. It just, I kind of I remember describing it to my friends as like all of a sudden I was like I'd been drowning my whole life, and all of a sudden someone had pulled me out, and I all the water was coming out of my lungs. It was
Mm,
such a, really, really, that's kind of when I thought, right, I need to stick with this.
mm, mm. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
great. Thank you. And I think that analogy speaks very well to the process, because that emerging from the water and spewing up a whole bunch of excess water from the lungs, is unpleasant. Doesn't really
Yeah.
feel good, but so necessary and so life giving in a way. And I think that's important to acknowledge, because I think many people come to meditation hoping that it's going to help them feel better,
Mm.
right? And in a way, it often does. But I think there is, as you mentioned earlier, one of the things that I like to offer in meditation is space for people to feel the resistances.
Yeah.
It is the turning and looking at the things we might consider unfavorable, right? The turning and looking at, in the Buddhist language, it's called the unwholesome, right?
Yeah.
So when we're turning and looking at what is unwholesome, just cover this a little bit. Unwholesome in the Buddhist tradition is not bad, but it's just the normal, natural tendencies in the human heart and mind that lead us to suffering. What is wholesome, also the normal, natural tendencies of the human heart and mind that lead us to happiness. And it's often thought in the Buddhist tradition that if we can see both of those in a balanced and honest way, then we can really work at letting go of the unwholesome,
Mm.
not condemning it, not making it bad, because then we won't be able to let it go. Then it'll just remain in our unconscious, right?
Yeah.
What in Jungian terms is called the shadow, or a big part of the inner critic is that, right? And so the the outlook that's encouraged that we take is to have this equanimity with our internal experience. Thoughts of greed, thoughts of hatred, thoughts of confusion, thoughts of desire, thoughts of anger. All of that is welcomed in under the microscope, right, and embraced, so that then we can work with that, right? Typically, all of that material doesn't really fit into who and what we think we might be, right? Particularly for long-time meditators, right? Oh, I've been meditating, how many years? I'm above desire, right? For example, right? And then, that person has this shadow that, that's, ripe with desire, and that ends up controlling their life. And that's an extreme example, but it definitely would end up shading and coloring that person's decisions and really the way they see the world. And so we have the opportunity to look at that and work with it, and then the wholesome too. We welcome that in. We don't covet it. We don't cherish it. We don't say, "Oh, look how loving I am," or anything like that. But just to recognize that we can cultivate those qualities, and they then in turn lead us to a happier life.
Yeah, it was an analogy. I think I told you about it when I was you were talking about this during the course, and I said it's a bit like our brains are like documentary makers, and it's we can't not have a documentary going on, because the camera zooms in on particular parts, it emphasizes some, de-emphasizes others, all that kind of stuff. But the trick is to just acknowledge that is the documentary, and also try and learn to see above the camera, to try and see the actual reality that's going on, and that the things that we sort of consider sort of, oh, that's bad, that's frightening, no, don't think that, don't look at it, don't acknowledge it. Actually, if you do turn and look at it, it's not terrible, it's not unbearable. I think wasn't there a Greek, a Roman Stoic philosopher who said that we are each of us stronger than we think, or something like that. Like, actually, there is very little that is truly unbearable, unendurable, or unacceptable. Which is it's an uplifting philosophy. And I think when they say, when you said, people go to meditation because they'll make them feel better, I think yes, they'll feel better, they will get better at feeling. Which,
yeah, nicely put. Yeah, I think that's much more accurate than I don't think meditation necessarily, it's an interesting dichotomy, because after we integrate all of that shadow material, for example, if we're exploring those practices, we do feel better. We do feel better. But it is crossing that very sensitive terrain that is often quite challenging emotionally, and can be quite painful. Yeah. And sometimes when I'm working with people who are doing that kind of work, they'll show up and they'll say, "Oh, I feel awful. This meditation, And I might then ask them, "So it's not effective? You want to change?" "Oh, no, I'm getting a lot out of it." Yeah. But so they're saying, it's really, they're voicing that. It's like, wow, this is really hard. It's challenging. It's painful. And sometimes when people say it's painful, if I know them well, I might say, "Oh, this is great. Practice is going well."
Yeah. And we'll loop back around to the topic of inner critic, which is the topic of your next course, very shortly. I actually wanted to just loop back, because what you've said reminded me of Nietzsche, because I think he made a description of like the last human being in, like, because Nietzsche had a lot of interesting ideas. He did tend to sort of flower them up a bit. Like the last human being would be sort of someone who basically just lived in a kind of numb state of just, no, they avoid unpleasant things, they completely cling to the pleasant, they just kind of live in a dull, bland, sort of unaffected state of, only living on the surface because everything underneath is just too much, and a very fragile kind of state of being. And it occurs to me that is kind of a state that many of us are in. I think particularly in the kind of, I don't want to make too broad a sweeping statement, but in a kind of the social mediaification of like, a lot of not serious mental health sort of, but that's kind of self-help sort of mentality of just think positive thoughts, just live your best life and all that kind of stuff. I mean, yes, to an extent, but also that best life will definitely, I remember a philosopher, Alain de Botton, I think that's how you pronounce it, who was basically talking about, like, he was talking about a lot of sort of stuff like that in a conference. He said, he was going around America, and he was saying that, look, essentially the process of living is about learning which kind, like, it's just basically just picking which kind of suffering you're going to endure in your life. Are you going to live an unfulfilled life? Are you going to live a life where you're doing what you want but you don't get rewards for it? Are you going to, and back and forth and back and forth, and sort of the more New Englandy type people were sort of a bit more on board with that, but in California they were horrified. It was like, what? You mean things can't be perfect? And it occurred to me that these kind of teachings would be extremely beneficial to a lot of people living in a kind of, the digital age, the binary age.
Well, yeah, I think these teachings, I'm often pleasantly surprised at how contemporary these teachings are. I mean, when I go back to the old texts, the old texts are actually, speaking of Buddhist tradition here, the old texts that I study are ripe with ancient Indian mythologies and the worldview. But fortunately, since the 1960s or so, there's been such a contemporary movement to modernize all of the teachings that are coming from Asia, and really welcoming them into the world culture. And so fortunately we have, because of the work of people like, if I may, I'll just mention a few of the people who I admire. The work of Joseph Goldstein and Sharon Salzberg, Jack Kornfield, Ken MacLeod, Stephen Batchelor, Oren J. Sofer, and many, many others. Bhikkhu Analayo, Bhikkhu Bodhi, two really fantastic Western monks that really do amazing translations of some really deep textual material. Without people like that, I think a lot of this material would have been lost. But yes, with the lens that they're offering, I consider myself part of that tribe, I suppose, where I'm trying to bring these early teachings in a modern way, to give them a modern voice, and make them accessible to everyone. And you're right. I think the 21st century person, whatever year they were born in, if you're alive today, there's a tremendous amount of suffering in this world, and these teachings are all about freeing ourselves from that suffering.
Right, so now we've established that this stuff's got credits. So you're well, now we've presented the papers. So your next course is called one moment. It's called Forgiveness, Self-Compassion, and the Inner Critic. Is that the right order?
The two next courses. Yeah. I've actually titled it Self-Compassion, Forgiveness, and the Inner Critic. Simply because I felt like it rolled off the tongue better.
I wrote down all the points, and I wrote them in the wrong order.
That's fine. It could be in any order, really. I'm still toying with how we're going to go through it in the 8 weeks. I do imagine us doing 5 sessions per topic, and one session as a kind of a wild card. We'll see how that falls. And yeah, so spending 5 2-hour sessions covering practices of self-compassion. I imagine we'll start there. We would probably do one whole session just on mindfulness, and really making sure everyone has a good, firm foundation in some sort of mindfulness practice. So I'll be talking about mindfulness, offering a couple of mindfulness techniques and things like that. And that applies to all 3 of those topics, right? Without mindfulness, we really can't engage in what's happening in the present moment. We just kind of check out, right? So mindfulness is kind of the integral ingredient in the whole, and really everything that I offer. If we're not being mindful, we're spaced out, and then we can't really engage. So mindfulness is quite an important factor in all of these practices.
I can attest to its importance, because I think basically one of the great lessons that I had to learn through my life was just, hey, can you just stop paying attention to the television in your head for a second there? I mean, can you just you don't have to switch it off. It's a very difficult thing to switch off, but can you just, for a moment, just for 10 seconds even, just acknowledge that actually it's not the only thing in the world. Look around the room, get up, get a glass of water, go outside and touch some grass.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There's a whole world out there, and a lot of it's missed when we're in our head thinking about the business meeting we have to go to, or the breakfast we have to cook, or the dream we had last night, or whatever.
So, all right. So the mindfulness is the baseline. So, but from there, where are we springing off from? So we've got self-compassion.
Right. And I imagine that will be the first step after mindfulness. We'll move into the practices around self-compassion. And I'm using a map or a structure that's been put forth by the psychologist Kristin Neff and her co-worker, co-author, co-teacher, co-facilitator, Chris Germer. And they work a lot together, and they've actually codified what they call mindful self-compassion. And that has 3 components to it. It has mindfulness as one of the components. Also, it has common humanity and kindness. And so this can be done in a meditation. That's how I'll be offering it in the course. I'll also be offering it as a practice that we take with us throughout the day. But the idea is that with mindfulness, we can connect to some difficulty that we might be having, right? So let's say I had an argument with my coworker, right? And so I leave the office, I close the door, and I'm back in my office, and I sit down and I might say, okay, how am I feeling right now? Okay, feeling tension in the abdomen, clenching in the jaw, perspiration. So really being mindful of the actual sensate, felt experience of the emotions that are coming up. Then I will name the emotions as well. Okay, there's anger, there's sadness, there's resentment, and so forth. So I'll just go through and name the emotions that I'm feeling, and then while I'm feeling the somatic experience in the body. That's the mindful aspect. Then the common humanity, we recognize that, all human beings feel this way, right? That this isn't my predicament, that this is a universal predicament, right? So we let go of personalizing the experience, right? We bring in this common humanity piece. And so there we see the compassion, right? Like, oh yeah, man, all of the human beings feel this way. It's really painful. It's really too bad. And so we start to feel into this compassion for all. And for me, that stage is really, they're all important, of course, but that one I find to be really surprisingly beneficial and eye-opening. Because when we're struggling, when we're suffering, when we're in pain, it often feels like somebody's put these blinders on us, like, over the eyes, right?
Yeah.
And so when we recognize that all other human beings feel this way, that just all of a sudden the blinders just open up, right? And we,
Yeah.
right, and that can be quite helpful. And then the last piece of that is the kindness piece, where we offer our self-kindness over the situations, or compassion, if you wish. I often like to put a hand on my heart. The way Kristen Neff offers that is just some move of self-compassionate touch. So it could be a hand on the cheek, or some people like to do this, or one hand on the shoulder, a hand on the abdomen, a hand on the heart. Some form of compassionate touch. It's almost like you're supporting yourself in that moment of challenge, right? And for me, even when I just do that, I can feel a softening. It's like, oh, right, that feels good. And then I might say, yeah, that was really tough back there. It's really amazing how you handled that. Or just giving myself words of comfort. Things that I think, was it Kristen Neff who I heard do this, or it was maybe another teacher, but they invited you to visualize your older, wiser self and try to hear what they might say to you. And that can be quite helpful. Yeah.
Ah, right. Yes. Yeah, I was about to say it does sound like rather you're treating yourself like your own child
Mm-hmm.
in a way.
That's a great way to put it. That's a great way to put it. In many self-compassion teachings that I've come across, and I'll be offering this as well in the course, we explore different ways of becoming our own best friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think it reminds me of a incident that occurred to me. I got scammed at no, not at much. It was like a tenner. Although I suppose nowadays that's actually quite a lot. Because I got a train station, and and I really went in on myself. I was like, idiot, you idiot, you idiot. What are you doing, you moron? All that kind of stuff. Really spitting hatred at myself. But after a while, I just sort of went, you know what, Paul? It came from a good place. You were trying to help, and it's all right. It's only a tenner. Nothing's wrong. Just get on the train. And I was sitting there on the train. I was thinking, oh, you know what, Paul? It's all right. Don't worry about it. We'll tell you what, buddy. We'll go home. We'll have a Chinese takeaway, and we'll forget all about this. We'll watch The Breakfast Club, and we'll have just a lovely old time. How's that? Oh, thanks, Paul. You're welcome, Paul. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
not that I'm saying Chinese takeaways are the instant solution to. Well, I mean they might be. They're really good, but 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 it's just sort of that kind of it's all right, we sort of tend to go through life with this sort of this when you really think about it, it's a slightly bizarre idea that we are total arbiters of wisdom. That every it's sort of a common condition to think, well, naturally I'm the smartest person in this room, because it's sort of part of I suppose it's part of the human condition, because we're literally rooted to our own perspective. We're incarnated in this body, and we're the only, we can't see any other people. We can't see through any other eyes. We can't feel through any other hands, or we can't hear through other ears. So we're all we've got, and so it's kind of natural that we become the, if you will, the messiah of our own little universe. But just reminding ourselves that we're not, and we're not the white. We don't have to be the wisest people in the world. Even you can just you can be human. It's all right.
Mm.
There's nothing wrong with being human.
Yeah, I think once people actually surrender to that, then the wisdom actually starts to come forth much more naturally,
Ain't that
right?
a contradiction?
Yeah.
Ain't that a? It's a real. I found that with a lot of spirituality. The second you stop looking for something, that's when it occurs.
Mm. Can be that way,
It's
yeah, sure.
bizarre.
Yeah, yeah, it can be. Yeah, and you're right. I mean, that is the human condition. We are born uh, very much feeling that we are the center of the universe. That's where our center of gravity is. It's in the eye, probably as a survival mechanism. I mean, how else will we have evolved? I think all animals have this innate sense that it's me here and the world out there. I think maybe not other animals. I don't know if other animals have that, but humans certainly do.
I think
Where it's
maybe
me grounded in
ants
here.
have a more a grounded sense of who they are.
Perhaps.
I, I imagine ants are probably just like, I'm just a cell in the great ant.
Yeah. Well, and that's what a yeah, I think that's the human condition is, and it essentially is that we are just ants in one great ant. But that's certainly not how it feels, right? Unless we've taken practices of compassion or equanimity or joy or love and kindness, where we start to feel the unity of the human species. And if you think about it, this is actually exactly the same thing that's happened in human history externally, right? Back in, what was it, the 1400s, when we discovered that the sun was actually the center of the universe and not the earth. Same thing, right? Once upon a time, for thousands of years, human beings thought that we were the center of the universe,
Yeah.
literally the center of the universe, and they hung Galileo for discovering the fact that we weren't.
Oh
And
my
and
god.
and and Copernicus too had a horrible time conveying this message that actually the sun is the center and we're rotating around the sun, and not only that, but we're 3 planets behind in line.
Yeah.
And there are lots of other planets out there on the other side. And so I imagine that, because after that, the worldview had to shift, right? Because you couldn't deny the science, right? At least back then, there wasn't this movement to deny the science. But they hung Galileo, and there was this big move against Copernicus to put that message down. But eventually, the human consciousness had to evolve to embrace the fact that we weren't the center of the universe. And I find that quite similar to the teachings of the Buddha. That all of these teachings, I think, well, a good portion of them anyway, are designed to help us let go of that feeling of being the center of the universe. And I think the resistance to that is much like the resistance that Copernicus and Galileo must have faced when they were putting forth their science.
It's like in Hermeticism, as above, so below. It's just, I mean, I'm just thinking, like, imagine being Copernicus or Galileo. You're sitting on the roof of your house looking up at the stars, and then all of a sudden they stop becoming ice crystals or whatever they thought they were in the sky, and all of a sudden it's like, boom, they're suns, and the universe is infinitely large, and the sun, our sun, isn't even the middle of it. Maybe there is no middle. There's nothing. There's, oh god, no. There's, like, it's such a, all of a sudden, I can only imagine, because we're brought up with that knowledge. We know, and I think because of that, we're sort of slightly mentally cushioned against it. But if you've grown up your entire life thinking that you're the literal center of the universe, or the planet is the literal center of the universe, and then all of a sudden, in an instant, you get a kind of psychic shock of just like someone just telling you, oh, by the way, everything is wrong. Just that must have been terrifying, existentially terrifying, and to an extent, I can sort of understand why they might have burned him, because it's just like,
Mm.
oh, you can't say that. That would just result in universal despair.
Yeah. Yeah. Well. Yeah. Perhaps.
I don't think they should. I mean, they
uh,
shouldn't have. I'm just saying they shouldn't have. I think,
well.
just hot take here, burning people at the stake is bad, actually. But
Sounds like a horrible fate.
mm,
But I think, I see a similar resistance to people when they embrace, or at least take on some of these practices, where it's like,
mm,
whoa, you know, it is one thing to know that life is impermanent on a logical level, using that as an example of one of the primary teachings of the Buddha, right? But it's another thing to actually meditate on impermanence and really feel how everything is in constant state of change. Like really knowing that in a felt way is
mm,
much different than just saying, "Oh yeah, everything changes."
yeah.
And so there is this like shock that happens sometimes when people go into a serious amount of practice around impermanence. And that's just one example of many of the teachings that are so radically against the current worldview, and necessarily so because the current worldview is dysfunctional.
Mm. I want to get into that a little bit later.
Yeah,
But first, I really need the toilet. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to pause this.
that's okay. Yeah, perfect.
um,
Yeah,
just let me just.
jazz hands.
I love them. Yeah. So modern world is so dysfunctional. Yeah, I mean, I know what you mean with the modern sort of viewpoint. Because I watched documentary actually about by a guy called Adam Curtis called The Century of the Self, and it was essentially about the invention of modern advertising. Um, I don't know how much of the history that you'd know, but basically, like in sort of the 1910s and before, advertising was fairly, Bob Basic. It was just like, hello, buy this product. It has many benefits. I will now tell you. It's more durable. It's cheaper, and it's got a little cup holder this time. So yeah, buy the new car. Buy. Uh, which God, I would have loved advertising to have stayed like that. But the but the cousin, I believe, of Sigmund Freud, got into advertising, and because the worry was that eventually, with modern societies producing so much stuff, that actually demand will be far outstripped by supply, and the entire the global economy will just fall to pieces because everyone will be like, yeah, I'm all right, thanks. Yeah, I've got enough stuff. Got my car. That's all nice. Yeah, I'm good. I don't want for much, which would have been a disaster. Um, well, for them. If you happen to be Henry Ford, that's a disaster.
Right.
But the so in order to avert this sort of wave of general contentment, um, the I think his name is Edward Malaise. He was the cousin of Sigmund Freud, and he used Freud's ideas of the unconscious and started really stimulating the idea of the individual and the idea of self-expression through buying and consuming goods. So your clothes say something about you, and
Right.
it was sort of a very different change in the thought patterns, because you go sort of back to maybe medieval times, or those sort of eras. Your average person would have just thought, yeah, I'm not much, I'm just Bob the blacksmith. I just,
Right.
I do my thing. I don't really, I'm not much. Whereas then, because of the needs of the machine society, it was sort
Mm.
of changed that, no, you're a center of the universe. You must express yourself
Mm.
by buying this clothes or this car or this thing, and this says this about you.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's only kind of accelerated over time, and it's become so hyper stimulated that people read so much into the consumption of goods,
Mm.
um that it's sort of become. I mean, I'm this is the, this I kind of I don't think that putting the genie back in the bottle is possible or even desirable in a way, because I think individual human flourishing is a lovely, beautiful thing, but it's kind of been so overstimulated, that impulse, by the and
Yeah.
so tied to the material world. um yeah, I don't know. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Well, no, I think you're absolutely right. I don't know much about, the evolution of advertising and things like that. I do know that, the human nervous system is wired so that when we have a success, which includes obtaining a new shirt, for example, we have a success. The dopamine that we get, from that success, the serotonin, wears off pretty quickly, and then we want another success of a similar fashion, and so, and this is how the way I understand capitalism anyway. That's how capitalism works. Is that it keeps trying to stimulate that, push that button,
Mm.
so that we're always wanting the next item, the next shirt, the next car, the next job, the next house, whatever it is, right? And I think that's one of the primary dysfunctions of the 21st century. I think there are a lot of other, I think that has given rise to a lot of other dysfunctions. But there are also other areas of our culture, our worldview, that's not healthy.
Mm.
And this actually leads quite nicely to the inner critic topic, because when we're born into a culture that's not healthy, yet our parents and our teachers, our educators, our culture, our society needs for us to conform to that as a 2-year-old, as a 3-year-old. Otherwise, we end up in prison, or we end up ostracized from our family or from our culture, right? So then we have to repress certain aspects of our being so that we assimilate into a sick environment,
Mm.
into a culture that's not balanced.
Yeah.
And so so that's the inner critic. It's keeping the healthier parts of us back so that they don't show up, because when we were perhaps 2 or 3, let's say we were introverted as a child, right? As a 3-year-old, we were very kind of quiet, shy. Many children are, yet our family was like, oh, come on, have fun. You should go out, and, go out there and make friends and things like that. But then they start to push down or repress the shyness, the introvertedness, and forcing themselves to be more outgoing. And then that shyness, that introvert, becomes a voice of the inner critic, right? So then whenever we're really feeding that and nurturing that very natural part of our personality, the inner critic says, oh no, you shouldn't be doing that right now. Oh no, you should go out and talk to those people, or you should go have dinner with those people, or you should go make friends with those people, right? And so this is the voice of the inner critic.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's because I mean, I was having a moment while I was hearing now. I just realized there was a part of me that was going, yeah, maybe don't criticize adverts so much since you get paid to act in them. But maybe don't do that. But it's yeah, and it's. I'm sorry, I'm trying to work out what to bounce back to that. It's
That's right.
I know what you mean though, and I wonder sometimes like how much of what we consider to be, I mean, what a society considers healthy in regards to sort of, oh, this is, this is healthy behavior, this is unhealthy behavior, this is sort of, I know the phrase, I know sort of, phrases like neurodivergent, which I mean, it's very, I mean, helpful in many regards. But I've had moments when I thought, but divergent by whose standard?
Mm-hmm.
From what? Where are we? It's all about sort of where you frame the where you put the frame of like this is what normal looks like,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of people that we would consider perfectly normal now 100 years ago would have been considered, insane or
Yeah.
and we and it can lead to. I imagine it does lead to a lot of beating yourself up, a lot of unrest when really there need not be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, beating yourself up, absolutely. And I think that's again a sign of the inner critic, right? And how we were given this really, I'll call it a set of instructions when we're, as we're growing up, age 2, age 3, that will help us assimilate into a culture and a society that's out of balance.
Mm.
And so, and I think most people intuit that.
Yeah.
We're on some level we're like, yeah, this doesn't feel right. I want to do this, but then the voice of the inner critic is like, oh no, you can't do that, right?
Yeah.
Because if you do that, you'll be ostracized, you'll be cast out, you'll be set aside. Keep in mind that ostracization back in tribal cultures, hundreds of thousands of years ago, that meant death.
Yeah.
And if a
Yeah.
child is ostracized from its family at 1 or 2 years old, 3 years old, equally means death,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
So it's a very, very deeply ingrained need to belong,
Mm.
right? Because that's how we survive as a child. So if we're entertaining thoughts that don't match the instructions that we've been given, the inner critic is going to jump on that. If we're entertaining behaviors and ideas and values that don't match what our culture and society tells us is of value and is normal, the inner critic's going to get on that.
Yeah.
And all of that, yes, we want to assimilate into a culture, but at the same time, we want to recognize that the inner critic is traditionally, anyway, or at least I think the reason why it's called the inner critic is that it's so harsh. It has this harsh, what really feels so negative when we have those thoughts. Oh, how could you do that? Why are you so stupid? Why are you so messy? All of this, right? That's very typical inner critic material.
Mm.
And so I think part of the benefit of the practices that we'll be engaging in the course is that we learn to hear the inner critic without the harshness. So we kind
Yeah.
of boil it down to get the nugget of wisdom, right? So if my inner critic is saying, if maybe I meditate for a while and then I get up and my inner critic is like, oh, you are having tons of thoughts. You are so distracted. How can you be meditating for so many years and be so distracted? Why are you so bad at this? You should be better at this by now, right? That's the inner critic, right? So if I listen to that and say, okay, let me, get the harshness out. Let me distill the harshness and take the wisdom. So the wisdom of that might be, oh, you want me to be more concentrated during meditation. Well, I want that too. Really, that's it. And we can meet there and say, well, what could I do? I could bet better sleep. Maybe I could have a cup of coffee before I meditate, which I do anyway, but just saying, just an example. Or I could do a little bit of exercise before meditation. So there are actually techniques that one could do then to serve what the inner critic might be offering.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to just circle back for a second there. That's very, very interesting stuff. When you were talking about sort of the fact we are sort of programmed to sort of go along with go along with an ill society, if you will. It reminded me of I believe it's an idea that's in a lot of African American philosophy. But I also think it was posed by Franz Fanon, who was in a French colony, whose name temporarily escapes me. But essentially, the idea is like, for a lot of colonized people, black people was the main topic of discussion. I think a lot of black civil rights groups have used that idea. It's this idea of a false consciousness that develops. There's a kind of, you're forced to view yourself both as how you want to respond, but also how you will be perceived by a racist society. Like there's kind of it's a very extreme version of the inner critic, in a way of like, you want, if someone's being, bigoted towards you, the impulse is to get riled up and get, aggressive. But if you're aggressive, that will be perceived as needlessly aggressive, which will be perceived as wrong, which could cite retaliation. So this stuff isn't just sometimes I feel like I should be like, more extroverted. No, this stuff has like real on the ground stuff, implications.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that, because I use these small examples to make them graspable for everyone. But yes, when we take these concepts to their end, the implications for social movements, for human rights, I think is it's quite vast. Yeah.
Yeah. And that, I suppose, viewing that thing with compassion, I mean, that's going to be quite difficult because it's it's extremely, but it's sort of a, it's a version of the survival instinct. You want me to not die, which, and I suppose it's only through understanding those kinds of consciousnesses and working with them that you can overcome them.
Yeah, overcome them might be a little bit strong. I might reframe that as making space for it.
Right.
That those voices, that the inner critic is always going to be hanging around, but we want to make space for that. In a sense, we want to befriend it. So yeah, I mean, we could have that voice in our head that wants to protect us. Great. That I would call that the healthy version of the inner critic. That's the wisdom side. The dysfunctional version of that is going to sound like, why are you out now? It's 11 at night, it's 3 hours after sundown. There's crazy people out here. You're crazy. You should be much more careful, right? It's gonna take something that's happening, really happening, objectively happening, and see the flaw in that, and then make us wrong because of that flaw. We personalize the flaw, and then it becomes about, I'm a bad person. Right?
Yes.
It's not, so maybe let's use a different example.
Yeah, I think I might have put a dampener on the whole thing and made it a bit heavy, but yeah.
No. Let's use the example of meditation again, for example. So let's say I'm meditating and I get up, the inner critic is, condemning my meditation practice. You're such a bad meditator and all this stuff. So the actual facts that transpired, the objectional facts are, I was sitting for a half an hour and I had a lot of thoughts. I felt distracted. That's actually what happened, right? Now the inner critic will take that experience and make it about me, right? It'll say, okay, I had a bad meditation and it was filled with thoughts and I should be better at this by now, so forth and so on, right? And then it kind of gets rid of the actual experience and just says, I'm a bad meditator. I can't do this right. I'm never going to meditate again. I'm not going to, this doesn't work for me, right? That's the usual progression of the inner critic. And so we want to be able to intercept that, so that if we have some meditation sessions where we're very distracted, it doesn't make us, want to stop meditating, right?
Yeah.
But many people do. Many people do stop there because it feels so uncomfortable to listen to that voice over and over again. So the idea is to take that harshness out. And so we can just hear, oh, you want me to be better at meditating? Well, so do I. Okay, well, how do we do that? What are some strategies we can put forth so that we make sure that we engage in this practice in a wholehearted way?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I tell you what, the amount of times that I have talked to people and they've said, oh, I can't meditate, I just think too much. I was
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
do you not even know who you're talking to? It's a non-stop show in my head, but you got to keep going. It's not
Everyone.
about
Yeah.
it's not about not thinking.
Yeah.
If you attach yourself to the idea of not thinking, you're gonna have a very rough time. You'll be,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's just another example of how, our society our culture has given us an out of balance message. So many people in the West, and really I would probably say the worldview now around meditation, it's getting better now with the mindfulness movement, but for quite some time, the idea of meditation was that we just sit and not think, and it's such a horrible misinterpretation of meditation.
no,
But that's just it. It's the out of balanceness of that people take that on board when they're young or when they're just learning how to meditate, and that becomes a natural voice of the inner critic. And so
yeah,
there we can see how that inner critic is forming.
it's not about not thinking. It's about realizing that the thoughts aren't everything.
Yeah, it's just another passing experience, like a sensation in the body, or a smell, a taste, a sight, a sound.
Yeah,
A thought is just like that. Yeah.
it's all cool, man. Just relax. Yeah, it's because it's such a. I think it can become, if with the inner critic rolling around in there, and it can very quickly unbalance and just tip your head into this endless sort of, like a really bad soap opera, like one of those really melodramatic ones that only last for like 2 seasons. They're just like, no, what have you done? You've betrayed everything. And oh God, maybe, it's sitting there just like, oh, maybe my girlfriend will come back to me. And oh no, why are you thinking that? And it's just this endless, or maybe a more apt description is just like a reality TV show, just endless screaming. And, and if you, if you keep going into it, if you keep trying to, literally fight fire with more fire, all that's going to happen is that it'll just be raging forever.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people do end up falling into that trap. Hope they'll sign up for the course. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great place to sort of to wrap up. You know,
Sure, can do.
it's
Let me go ahead and give the details for both of the courses.
yes.
Um, yeah, so the course that we've been talking about here, self-compassion, forgiveness, and the inner critic. I'm just going to read off my notes here.
No worries.
And this is offered in from October 11th to December 2nd. More or less, adjust your dates accordingly because this is worldwide. It's offered online, so in Australia, New Zealand, and here in Asia, it's a day ahead, and in the West, in the States, and so forth, it's a day
If you're
earlier.
if you're in England,
So
it's in the morning.
in the morning, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are two sections. Section one, it's from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. on Tuesdays and Saturdays, East Coast time. That would be Wednesdays and Sundays in Asia, Australia, and New Zealand. And in Thailand, it's 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. That's where I am, Thailand. Section two is really designed to cater to people in Europe, like yourself, Paul, or near Europe anyway. And that's on Wednesdays and Sundays from 10 a.m. to 12 noon, if you're in France, that part of Europe. That would be Thailand, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. on Wednesdays and Sundays. Philippines, it's 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Wednesdays and Sundays, and so forth.
You're getting up
So
very
you can
early.
adjust your time accordingly. I do go to bed very early. I was going to say one other thing about that. Oh, for most areas of the world, there is a clock change as we move into later into the year.
Yeah.
So in Thailand, the clocks don't change. So all the retreat participants will change their clocks according to where they live in the world. So take that into account if you're signing up and you want to do all the sessions live. You'd have to figure in the time change.
I'd like to actually, can I just say for the audience,
Yeah.
if you sign up for the course, they do send you an email the day before with the times on it and everything. You don't need to memorize it and do a lot of mental maths. You'll know. It's all right.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I send out a Zoom link the day before usually with all the
Yeah.
information, but it's the same time twice a week if you want to plan your schedule accordingly.
Yeah.
So I'll talk about the other retreat, which is loving kindness, widening our circle of care. This is also an 8-week meditation program that's running October 5th to November 26th. We meet, section one meets on Wednesdays and Sundays from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. East Coast time. Section two will meet Thursdays and Mondays, 10 a.m. to 12 noon, Europe, i.e. France time. Thailand and Asia, it's the same. Wednesdays, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Sundays, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. in Thailand, section one, and section two, Thursdays and Mondays, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. I know that's a lot.
Yeah.
So if you're really curious, or if you're interested to sign up for the program, go to the website, suchsweetthunder.org, and all of the information for both retreats is on there. So look around, check out the website. There's lots of other materials there as well, lots of free videos and recordings and things like that that you can access that could really support your meditation practice. So thank you.
I suppose I'll do a plug too, since this is a two-way street.
Yeah.
If you were entranced by my dulcet tones and and witty repartee, you can find me on YouTube on Paul M. Bradley. Paul M. Bradley. Bradley. I upload podcasts such as this one, video essays, some monologues for my acting, vlogs, anything that I feel like, really. That's my main source of interaction with the world. Come check me out, Paul M. Bradley. Ta-da!
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for that. That was a lot of fun. Always a pleasure, Paul. And
Absolutely.
look
Likewise.
forward to seeing you on Monday.
Yes. That was Chris Luard, everyone. So if you're interested in partaking in that course, then you can sign up for it at suchsweetthunder.org. Remember, .org. Well, that's all from me today. Have a good one, and goodbye. God, I've never done an outro that short. Bloody hell.